Oh, goody, goody, here it comes.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show.
You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here.
Oh my God, don't stop now!
With your hosts, Brian, John, and Elaine.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm your host, Brian Kindon, and my fellow co-host and filmmaker, John Woolscroft.
Brian, I don't know who this is a bigger treat for us or the audience here who gets to listen to it, but we are with a...
Both?
Yeah, with a filmmaking icon here, Director Mark Pellington.
Hi, guys.
You may know from Arlington Road, Mothman Prophecies, and if you've ever watched a music video, I'm sure you've checked it. You've seen it.
I was going to say, like,
amongst many other things.
Doing research for this, like I looked at the number of music videos that you've worked on and continue to work on, and it's impressive.
I love music videos.
I can
They're
tell.
A great form.
I can tell. Yeah. No, but Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start off just by, talking about, your love of music videos and just diverse media in general. As a storyteller, as a filmmaker, doing a music video, doing TV, doing film, there are different outputs, right? And they require different things. So as a storyteller, what do you do when you're approaching a music video, TV show, or film that is special to that particular medium?
Now, after doing it for close to 40 years, I think the first promo I made at MTV was in 1985. I was an intern in 83. I was a production assistant in 84. So the first time I made something was in 1985. Next year, I'm going to publish a book called The Visualist, which is really about that 40-year journey.
Yeah.
From videos, documentaries, commercials, TV, movies, short films, abstractions. The other night, I went to Vegas and saw U2, and they were using some of the same stuff in their Sphere show in Vegas that I had made for them 31 years ago for Achtung Baby, the Zoo TV tour.
You got money for that, right?
I wish. But when I started, in answer to your question, applying your instinct to what image you create, listening to music, and I listen to a song, and if I close my eyes and images start pouring out of my unconscious, I just start writing them down. And before I know it, I could listen to a song 12 times and write a 12-page treatment, be like, here it is. Whether it's Jeremy or Public Enemy, that's how my brain always kind of works in music videos. Sometimes it's a story, sometimes it was a collage. There was a lot of collages before I started to say, this is a story about a boy who kills himself, or an anthrax. This is a story about a man who's lonely and desperate with his wife, and they pick up a woman and suck her memories out of her. So it took me a long time before I started writing narrative videos.
Right.
Rooster, Jeremy, these videos in the kind of 90s, but before I just made collages. Here's a theme, here's imagery that relates to the theme, boom. So you do that, you do poetry films, which is essentially short form. You control the word and the music in a poetry series more than you do in a music video because that soundtrack is controlled for you. We start doing that, then you start doing music videos and say, can I have the instrumental and can I have the stems, the parts, and let's do an Imagine Dragons video for a 4-minute song and make it 13 minutes. Or Not a Surf, let's take a 3-minute song and make it 11 minutes. And that comes from working in longer form pieces,
right.
Movies and TV, where you learn about character and structure and leaning a little more on plot. Like plot. TV is all about plot. What's the story? Well, you can have stories without heavy plots, but people watch a lot of TV to invest in characters, right? So the reason I like music videos is because they're a little more unconscious and you can play with time and they're a little more fractured. The movies like Mothman that are really kind of play with some different levels of consciousness and reality, even if you want everything to feel completely real, those appeal to me. I've made sentimental dramas, I've made dark dramas, I've made nihilistic dramas like I Melt With You. They made all different kinds of things and they all appeal to me because they're all different kinds of stories or characters or situations that I like. Everything I'm developing are all different kinds of things. Songs. I wish I could make more music videos, and I wish the business was still going in a way that you could actually sustain somewhat of a living doing it.
Right.
You can't. Or the music that's out now, it's just like I'm at odds with Drake and Sweetie, and like have you seen a video like Jeremy in the last 5 years?
No.
10 years?
No.
Well, I don't mean to be that guy, but I got to kiss the ring, and I think, no joke, the Jeremy is in the top 5 greatest music videos I've ever seen in my life.
Great song, great video of that time, of the early 90s. Yeah. But as the phone kind of changed everything, and social media changed everything, like the culture is just completely different. Who's angry? Who's expressing the anger of a generation now? What artist? No, I mean, Taylor Swift is very popular. Beyonce is very popular, but like, they're not making music for me.
No.
Are they making music for a fucked up, alienated 22-year-old guy? Well, no, but there's bands that speak to them, right? But I don't think that that representation, remember, Pearl Jam and MTV was huge.
Yeah.
MTV was like a national radio station. That's gone.
That was my early morning get ready to school.
But it's all
material.
fragmented
Yeah.
now. Everything on social media and internet is like, there's no consensus. So it's a million things for a million people. And I came of age in a time when there was actually some, you could make one video and people would talk about it. Look, 30 years later, people can still say, wow, that holds up, or, this movie holds up. So number one, I'm like happy to have come out of that era. And all I can do in answer to your first question is just like, read a script and be like, I like that, I want to work on it. How would I shoot it? What do you see? And I trust my instincts. I trust what I see. Work with collaborative people, designers, production designers, and just like, use AI to visualize stuff.
I love the fact that you say, like, you start off with the imagery first, and then that leads into kind of the narrative. I've met people who are just like, they come up with the story right there, and then kind of try to
It all works
the
different
visuals.
ways. I've got a movie that is close to getting financed now that started as like, what would happen if, and it becomes a paragraph, and then a half a page, and it becomes a page, and I'm like, let me get together with a writer, and we start developing it. And I love working on scripts, because that sort of imagination, let's meet for breakfast. I've literally been writing a script for 2 years with a guy, Louis Clark, kid. He's 66 years old, I'm 60. We've been working on a script for 3 years. He's the guy that wrote Mothman with me. We did the rewrite that Richard Gere said yes to. He and Ernie Marrero wrote this thing with me and put in just these ideas and took together all these previously written drafts and said, here's the version we'd like to make. And maybe they would have said yes, and maybe they would have said no. If they said no, fine. Better to write something you want to make, and that happened to be the one that Richard Gere said he wanted to make.
Out of curiosity, coming from not just, but just doing music videos, in terms of doing feature films, how much attention do you put towards like storyboarding and sticking to exact story, or is it, do you allow
Zero.
I wondered, a lot of freedom on set. There's like, let's try to put the camera here. Let's just.
Where I like to board, I mean, with cameras on phones, and like, if you go to a location and we're doing the scene of the guy talking to two guys on a podcast, and we've decided that this is where we're shooting it, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, well, how do we light it? And you decide, like, I might, if I know that this is what it is, and this is the table, and this is what I've come up with, as long as I mean, I probably wouldn't do it this way, but I'd be like, okay, there's a table where I place you guys psychologically, right? Imbalanced here, like, I would maybe take a picture of the place. I wouldn't draw, I would do a photo board. I might have scrap references from a painting or a photograph that show the kind of color scheme. And I have some scrap and kind of put it together that way. The only time I really storyboard is if a lot of people have to all communicate stunts, an action sequence,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, like where the stunt people and the effects people and physical effects people. The bridge sequence in Mothman,
Yeah.
every frame from the beginning, from when John Klein hears the first sound to the end was boarded. It's the only way that all those people could understand what was going on, even abstract stuff. And so you would go through in the board, we got this shot, we don't need this one, how about this, you know? So for big sequences, you have to board, but otherwise, I don't.
And before we jump to into Mothman, as I mentioned before we started recording, I love Arlington Road, but I consider that like one of the best movies that you've never seen. You know, the Royal You. So yeah, can you speak to how you got involved with that project?
I had made a movie, my first movie called Going All the Way with Ben Affleck and Rachel Weisz in 1996, 97. It came out in Sundance. And the company I made it for was called Lakeshore. And they ended up making tons of movies. I made 4 movies for them. And it just so happened I was in the right place at the right time that a Nichols, which is a screenwriting fellowship, Nichols Fellowship winner named Aaron Kruger had written a script called Arlington Road. And a guy on the jury called a woman and said, "This is a great script. If you have any directors," she didn't have any directors, but she knew my partner, Tom Gorai. She called him and said, "This is something Mark might like." But it wasn't out in the world. He didn't have an agent. It was just like kind of under the radar because he had just done the contest. So the producer had it, knew that I had made this movie for Lakeshore and said, "Oh, they like him." And I'd done Jeremy. It was dark. Like, great. He's got a company that might want to make it. I read it, loved it, called the guy at Lakeshore and said, "This is incredible." He read it, and 2 days later, we were offering it to Tim Robbins for either role. And then 3 days later to Jeff Bridges. So within 10 days from reading it, the movie was greenlit, which is insanely fast. And it was a great script. Blueprint was it was there. And I just shot and prepped the fuck out of that movie. And it was ahead of its time.
Very much.
Way ahead of its time and not what you expected. But the feeling of that movie at the end was exactly the first time you read it and you're turning the page like, "Oh my God, the hero's going to save the day." No, he's not.
The only one who's not supposed to be here is you.
And you felt sick to your stomach.
Yeah.
You read it and you started to get this feeling and you're like, oh, and you read all the way to the end and Jeff Bridges' kid stays with Tim Robbins.
Yeah.
We shot that ending. We shot several different endings like that. And we tested that ending, and it tested worse than any other one because the women who watched the movie were like, "No way. You kill the hero, but you can't also have his kid live with them."
Yeah.
So we had this thing, oh, the kid went away with a relative. I love the original ending because it was just like, that's what Aaron wrote.
And Joan Cusack, man, what a turn for her to be so damn
That was Tim's
creepy.
idea.
Yeah.
That was Tim's idea. Yeah. He knew her, had done plays with her, and it was a long time ago. Business has changed now. You could have a really hard time getting that movie made.
Well, it's interesting because it's about domestic terrorism, and it came out just shortly before 9/11, where everything's international terrorism.
Came out before we got delayed because it was Columbine, which is...
Yeah.
So school shootings replaced... Okay, so he wrote it based on The Parallax View, Alan Pakula's movie. Mm-hmm. Parallax View was based on the hot button topic of political assassination. So post RFK, Martin Luther King, assassination was the shit, right? Mm-hmm. So by the time he wrote Arlington Road, post Oklahoma City, domestic terrorism was the hot button topic, right? But sure enough, domestic terrorism gets wiped away by Columbine, school shootings.
Yeah.
Right? So that was delayed. European company financed it, not an American company. I don't think you could get it made now, a big budget, dark thing like that.
Right. No. Well, you talk about how that movie was ahead of its time. I mentioned to you before we started recording that I really believe that Mothman is ahead of its time when it premiered. That now you look at movies that are produced by A24 and specifically, and what has been colloquially referred to as elevated horror, where it is more psychological, where you're not 100% always seeing the monster, where it is internal to the characters. And I really believe Mothman was the start of that. I really do.
I wish A24 would re-release. I wish they would re-release Mothman. I think that would be great.
That would be great.
Yeah. But I guess my question to you about that is at the time you made that, this is coming off of, the found footage era of horror and the start of like the torture porn type of horror at that time. You decided to go in a route that was kind of counter to that, which was more subdued, not 100% showing the monster. What was the choice on your part as a director to do that?
I was like into perception and fear, and like the subsequent drafts. I read the first draft that Richard Haddam had written, and I thought it was really intriguing, but I passed on it because we were still mixing Arlington Road. I'm like, I don't want to do the movie. I don't want to do a movie right now. They came back like 5 months later and said, hey, we have a new draft of Mothman Prophecies, read it. And I was like, I'm reading it, I'm like, yeah, that's it. Like, what is this? Like, oh, and the monster, the creature comes out, and like, you see the red eye? I'm like, okay, and then I passed, and then 3 months later, another draft. I'm like, you keep making it more overt.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm more interested in the other way. So the draft that I read was like, and the task was, how little can I see?
Right.
Like, how little, so we would do these creature tests. I'm selling some of the original creatures tests that the Cinesite, the visual effects company, did. And like oh, that, boy, if you, the less you see, the more effective it will be.
Yeah. I mean, you even see like the scene where
it's less than 3 seconds in this entire movie, I think, where you actually could see the thing coming towards you. I think in like 4 different scenes. I think the longest one, and I say is like Indrid Cold, which is a guy with his shoulder hunched over with smoke and backlight and infrared film. Like, there's no people like, oh, the CGI of Indrid Cold. I'm like, that ain't no CGI. That's just like shape, unknown. No. The more you could do in camera organically. I just thought a lot of these things are silly.
Well, it's just funny. Like I think any other director would go the way that would probably popular. It's like, oh, let's get a guy in a suit.
Well, the guys who make comic book movies and make shitload of money, and not me.
No, but what I'm saying is like I love the fact that it is more subdued. Like the scene where you see the red eyes coming, it comes right straight at the camera, and then the next time we see the monster is in that X-ray, and we see like that outline of it. Those sorts of things, they stick with you longer than some guy in a fucking suit.
Sure. I mean, the aggregate effect of like the lights in the Christmas tree and her thing and the sound design of that, and in that accident, it comes toward you, the sound of the trash can getting knocked over, her head hitting the thing. All of them, each one of those beats of that 4-second sequence from the screech of the brake to the ending, like each one of those is meant to like just kind of what?
Yeah.
Like fuck with you in a way that you can then be like Logic when he goes back later, the burn, and those were lights from this thing. Again, just like, is it this or maybe it's that? And all suggestion, right?
Yeah.
The power of suggestion is far more erotic and interesting and mysterious than the overt thing.
The light you don't turn on,
Yeah, like you see a monster. What was that big horror movie in the last couple of years I was watching? That like, oh, did you see Smile or see Barbarian? Right, and I watched both of them. I was like, I got maybe a couple little.
Barbarian, I laughed. Like
I was just
nothing
like,
against
I'm
it. I
not
just laughed.
Scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't get scared. I was like, okay, what scared me? Jason Bateman did this show on HBO. What was it called? Was it The Outsiders?
Oh, I think it was the one on Netflix.
Stephen King? That was on HBO.
No, HBO.
I think it was a Stephen King thing. And that creeped me out. The sound design creeped me out. The cinematography creeped me out. Like, it was just like the pace of it. It felt very Mothman. I wrote an email to Jason Bateman, who was a Mothman fan.
Yeah.
I said, wow, you really fucking did it. He goes, wow, thank you. That means a lot to me. Because like within the filmmaking community, Mothman is still pretty respected.
Yeah.
And I think so we weren't overtly like, we're going to elevate. I had never done that thing before. I just want it to be stupid. I want to be like, oh God, that feels like a joke and a mask that might scare a 12-year-old. An adult's going to look at it and be like, okay. Yeah. And none of the drawings really ever, like when you see them for like a frame, like, oh, that's like a bad dream, like kind of jolts you. But the longer you look at it, the less power it has, right?
Yeah. One thing I do love about your movie, and also through your work, I've noticed, is juxtaposition being the key thing there. Like through Mothman, you have a lot of scenes where it's very much in almost grayscale, but then you juxtapose it with some like really highly saturated, highly in your face music video style imagery that just kind of kicks home what the theme of that particular scene is. And I don't really see that a whole lot anymore in horror movies or as movies in general, of montage being used for juxtaposition. And like it really struck me upon rewatching it, how strong that is.
Yeah, I mean, I just make them. I don't know. I just don't even think about it.
It's like breathing.
No, I mean, it's like each genre is a different thing. You know what I mean? I did a movie called I Melt With You, 2011. Mm-hmm. 4 guys go to Big Sur and all kill themselves. It was dark. Mm-hmm. And it's real. I love it. And there's parts of it that are exactly like Mothman. It's really scary. Way ahead of its time. Very polarizing. Mm-hmm. A lot of people hated it because like 4 rich white guys go up and kill themselves after doing drugs and complain about the world. Well, so it predetermined the toxic male.
Yeah.
Right? And it wasn't that way. I had gotten sober and I was like frustrated and I wanted to go make a movie. And this script just spoke to my recently sober, I need to like get rid of all this shit out of my system. And it was based on a French film called Le Grand Bouffe about 4 guys that eat themselves
I've seen that,
to death. So it became this just kind of allegory about male failure and greed and the death of ego.
Yeah.
In this extremely, I love it. It fucking holds up, and it's slowly holding its ground as a little cult thing. Because like, but when it came out, it was just like, oh my God, it's too long. I stupidly showed a 2-hour and 25-minute cut at Sundance. I said, oh, this is an experimental movie, but. You get creamed. But there's a lot of it that is a horror film on a certain level. As these 4 guys disintegrate, the same brain in terms of like a long shot, then a jolt of color, it's the same application.
Yeah.
Years later, had made different things. Stuff that I shoot now, a Not a Surf video from last year. I like color, like weirdness, shadow, very much in that vocabulary.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, in terms of like talking about the business end of these things, like how important was it to get Richard Gere involved in Mothman Prophecies, to have that name at the top of the poster?
Richard Gere, the movie wouldn't have been made if Richard Gere didn't say yes. That's the only way that the studio could make a $50 million movie, give Richard Gere $18 million, make it for 32, pre-sell the foreign sales based on Richard Gere, who was on his down. He would have ups and downs. Like he was kind of in a down cycle at that point, but was still a big movie star. The movie business was different in 2001. Right? There was home video. Like you can't even compare it to now.
Well, I love that at this time period when this came out, this is kind of right after he was doing a lot of those like romantic comedies, but he does your movie. He also does Unfaithful, which are 2 that like come out the same year, which kind of turn him into more of like the suspenseful thriller type of star.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, Richard's a great actor. Richard can be great, and he wasn't great in Autumn in New York, but I don't think anybody thinks that was a great movie.
It's
Probably him included. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Richard. Richard's done some great stuff over time. Look, he's almost 80 years and he's still making movies.
Gotta appreciate that longevity.
Hell yeah, man.
Hold on one second. Your mic isn't working.
What?
Your mic is not working.
let's hope that we're 80 and still
All right, you're good. Yeah.
pray that you're 80 and still making shit.
So you have some other stuff in the works here. Can we get kind of a sneak peek or anything that you want to plug
A
here?
movie, a female version of Taken. It's called Mom.
Oh,
and that we're in the process of casting right now. Very, very dark, but really emotional kind of take about the price of violence. And like a woman's trying to get her daughter back, but there's no guns, but it's got packs quite a punch.
Yeah.
And there's a movie that I've been working on for a long time that Paul Schrader wrote that we're in the process of trying to put together called Clang, which is a murder mystery. And it's set in 2004. And it's about a guy with dementia, Alzheimer's witness, who's the only suspect, yet the only witness in the death of a woman, and his son who returns home and starts to edit together his father's speech and imagery to solve the death. It's kind of like the movie Blow Up and Blow Out and a little Memento, and it's kind of definitely a throwback to that. And a couple of other thrillers that are close to getting made. So, and more importantly, is we're going to be doing Mothman as a TV show.
Really?
I'm going to premiere a little teaser trailer that we made for the studio to show them. We're in the process of writing the pilot now for Paramount Plus, and a guy named Alex Kurtzman, who runs the Star Trek Empire, is one of the executive producers. Terry Metalis, who did 12 Monkeys and also does Star Trek stuff, is one of the executive producers. And we're writing it right now, and I hope within the next 6 months we can come back on your show and talk about Mothman as a global TV series.
Oh, hell yeah.
Awesome. Yes.
You'll get the taste tonight of what it's like, and boy, I think if anything's ready to come back and now infect the world of streaming, it's this one.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. And
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been fantastic.
It's been great. Like, especially as filmmakers ourselves, hearing the process from someone who, is still in it and producing fantastic work is great. It's like reassuring to us.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, you got to keep going. The business has changed, and I was like working nonstop up until COVID, and then since COVID, it's really changed.
Yeah.
Who they want to hire, how they hire people, the whole business, there's the cultural changes. So it's hard. It is hard to raise things. I constantly am looking at how low of a budget can I get that to. My career a long time ago, I didn't follow the path of, making superhero movies or, I was making a movie in 2004 with Harrison Ford, 2 years after Mothman, a big action thriller, and my wife died. So my life kind of took a left turn. I always say my wife died, the iPhone came, and digital came. So digital was great to start shooting 5D and stuff like that, but before you knew it, it was 6-7 years later, and if you hadn't made a movie, and Mothman never really made money for people, the business is well, what did he make? Oh, that was a long time ago. Then you make a movie that doesn't do any business, and you're before you know it, you're 8 years out. So I think people never lost faith in me as a filmmaker, but I never got a chance to come back and make. So that's why I started doing a lot of TV. Cold Case, Blind Spot, I put that stamp on TV, but I think now everything's come full circle and I'm ready to kick it back to movies.
Awesome.
Well, I'm excited to see him.
Definitely excited to see it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you
Absolute
again,
pleasure.
Mark. Appreciate it.
Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Psycho Show. If you haven't already done so, follow the podcast on your favorite podcast app of choice or head over to cinemapsychoshow.com/follow. And we will see you next time.